And the one-stop, one-shop, and the role, the kind of very activist role of the the fund, your organization, in this. Have you assessed what kind of bureaucracy that will require and the cost of that?
Yeah, we have, and the idea is to make this a very lean operation. The Green New Deal Fund itself doesn't actually need to be a significant organisation in any way. Our role is to pull the funding together, the funding from government and then borrowing from banks, because the funding from government is used as grant assistance for you as a consumer. Then we, the fund, will borrow from banks in order to provide you with your loan finance. Now, that won't take much infrastructure, but the bank funding is obviously critical from commercial banks or indeed the European Investment Bank and other European sources. The work itself will be done by organisations that already exist. We are not planning to set up, a network of installers. We're not even planning to actually organise the marketing or the day-to-day work around it. What we'll do is we will tender for people to deliver this around Northern Ireland, and there are organisations out there who've got considerable experience in retrofitting homes through things like the Warm Homes Scheme of government, and they'll take on all of that. So I envisage literally a handful of people or fewer being involved in administering the fund.
One of the real nagging problems in Northern Ireland is the huge level of fuel poverty. I mean, it's 45% or almost 50%. How does that calculate into this whole project when many of those, of course, would be in desperate need of?
Well, if you take the principle that people will, if they participate in the Green New Deal, will make immediate savings on their energy bills, then, well, from a fuel poverty point of view, that's got to make sense. Now, there would be a lot of people who are not even in a position to borrow the money, and who are on benefits, and they would still be covered by the government's Warm Home Scheme. And so that will continue to exist. In fact, what we would like to see, and we think economies of scale can be achieved through this, by delivering the Warm Home Scheme and the Green New Deal alongside. It's essentially the same kind of physical activity, just for homes with different incomes. So we'd like to see that happening together. Now, government responded positively to our business plan when we put it out, and there was a promise in the budget to put in $4 million a year into the Green New Deal.
That's 2011 budget?
That was the last budget for 2011-2015. Now, the $4 million a year starts next April. It originally was supposed to start last April, but the first $4 million disappeared very quickly between draft budget and final budget, as government did its sums. So there's $12 million allocated to this. Now, it's a start. It's not going to do things at scale. I mean, I don't think you could really call this the Green New Deal in the Roosevelt sort of sense, but it is something to get started with.
And as a pilot project, it would be important in kind of working through some of the glitches.
Well, it would be nice to do a pilot. It would be nice to do a pilot project. We discussed with government pilot projects that we could do. Now, things have shifted a bit recently. I was going to make one point though, about the 12 million and the budget. There has been very welcome political support for this. All 5 parties in government have been very supportive of the Green New Deal. We had. At our launch, Minister Attwood, Alex Attwood, who was the DSD Minister, Department of Social Development at the time, he spoke, and Arlene Foster, who was the Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Investment, she spoke as well, and people from all the different parties spoke in support. So that was great. In the budget, the 12 million was allocated, and the wording of the budget was that the Green New Deal will create thousands of jobs, it will save energy, it will cut carbon emissions significantly. That's all true. Green New Deal can do that, but it won't be doing that for 12 million pounds. It needs much greater investment and commitment from government to achieve that. So I think we have to persuade politicians to really take this that much more seriously, even though we are in obviously a fiscally very constrained environment at the moment. this kind of investment will pay back very considerably to the Northern Ireland economy. And I think that's one of the things been absent here, is the incentive to really sort of push an incentive like the Green New Deal, which is the equivalent is progressing across the water. Because government is committed and has committed itself legally to these legally binding targets, Northern Ireland isn't committed to any legally binding targets, and therefore government is not as incentivized as it needs to be to really sort of push this agenda. I think that's probably why we find ourselves now in this slightly difficult position where we're trying to move from an initial government commitment to actually really making the thing happen. So we're now, the 12 million has been allocated. We've been working with government departments on developing pilot schemes initially, but now I think it's fair to say the goalposts have moved a little bit recently, and government is now looking at other ways of spending the 12 million allocated to the Green New Deal, but to get similar outcomes in terms of energy use, CO2 emissions, job creation, fuel poverty. And they're looking at how you might spend £12 million on advice, an advice strategy, or on a advertising strategy. But I think the most interesting one they're looking at is following the Great Britain model, which they call, slightly confusingly, the Green Deal. Without getting too bogged down in the technicalities of all this, the key thing about the Green Deal across the water is that it is financed through a supplier obligation. That's an obligation on energy companies to save CO2 emissions or cut CO2 emissions through investments in domestic properties. So they have been, over the last two and a half years, working hard to legislate and to work with companies and the private sector to put in place an infrastructure for delivering a wholesale retrofit of housing across England, Wales and Scotland. And the way it's going to work there is that actually it'd be companies like Tesco's, Marks and Spencer's, B&Q would be the people who approach you as a householder and sell you this idea of a pay-as-you-save mechanism for energy efficiency and renewable energies in your home, primarily energy efficiency. The weakness of it is, and the weakness that a lot of people have recognised, is that there are few incentives for people to get involved, other than here's a loan that you can pay back over up to 25 years, which will save you energy, will save you money on your energy bills. It certainly won't cost you anything in terms of your annual energy outgoings. There will be incentives for people with solid wall houses to help make that pay, but for most people it's just really that offer that's there. We don't think that's enough, and market research I think has shown that that's not enough, and a lot of people, observers of this in England, Wales and Scotland, don't think that's enough, and think that government is going to have to find ways of putting some form of grant support or subsidised interest rate or whatever into that to enable people, to incentivise people to get involved. The problem is that what government wants from the Green Deal is to see it all happen but not have to pay anything itself.